Because there is a larger narrative going on in this nation right now. There are conservative Americans, non-liberal Americans, moderates, people who are reluctant to be on board with whatever political establishment is running things in Washington, D.C., and many of them found themselves supporting Donald Trump just for the sheer notion that he cut against the grain and represented change, and represented a new direction, represented fighting back against that establishment. And right now, a lot of those voters are feeling disheartened. A lot of those voters, I fear, feel like their vote doesn't even matter. Their activism doesn't matter. Their advocacy doesn't matter. Their fundraising doesn't matter. Their energy going to protests, going to rallies doesn't matter. And I don't want that. It does matter, and it can make a difference. You don't win all the time, and yes, sometimes the other guys play dirty and even cheat to win. That doesn't mean you give up. Joining us right now to talk about that is Mark Meckler. He is president of the Convention of States Project, which, by the way, is one of the solutions to make some change in this country. But also, Mark Meckler, I first met you when you were working with Tea Party Patriots back in 2009, 2010, through our mutual friend, the dearly departed Andrew Breitbart. You've been there in the trenches where it seemed insurmountable, and you were able to organize and make a difference. And that's what we need right now, isn't it, Mark?
It is what we need, and I'll tell you, Larry, I know that I'm not in the majority in this country right now, but I'm not down. I'm not dejected. I'm always worried, but I'm not fearful of what's happening in the country, because I can tell you, as a guy that's on the ground all over the country now, working in all 50 states, this election was an incredible victory for the things that you and I hold near and dear. And we see this in state legislatures all across the country. By the way, over 126 seats so far flipped from blue to red in state legislatures. It was a wave.
Yeah. I respect that, and I understand it. My concern is you've got voters in some of those states that we're talking about, Pennsylvania or in Georgia or in Michigan or Wisconsin, who were motivated, they were out there, but they feel like the other side is just going to, they're going to rig the election, and so why bother?
Yeah, look, and I actually think that's true. I don't think those are unreasonable emotions to be having at this moment, but we have a chance to do something about it with this wave, and we've got a lot of pressure. Our organization is putting pressure on the legislatures in Pennsylvania and in Michigan and in Georgia and in Wisconsin and Arizona and Nevada, all the states that are were on the edge, to make sure that they do something to investigate, first of all, right? I think most of these legislatures, they would just rather see this thing go away and it'd be 2021 already, but we're going to keep the pressure on them to make sure that they're doing the audits. We see this happening in Michigan, the state legislature led by Lee Chatfield, the Speaker of the House. We see it happening in Pennsylvania right now. They're actually doing real audits. I hope we're going to see that in Georgia. I'm a little bit concerned about the Secretary of State there, but we're putting the pressure on, and this is what activists should be doing in this very moment.
So let's talk a little bit about, first of all, let's look in the rearview mirror a little bit. It was 2009. Obama just won the presidency. Democrats had 59 Senate seats, soon to be 60, when Senator Arlen Specter, Republican in name only in Pennsylvania, changed parties so they could bypass any filibuster efforts in the United States Senate. And Nancy Pelosi was Speaker of the House, huge majority in the House. Looked like the darkest days for Republicans or conservatives in this country. And Mark Meckler, that's when you and a couple of other great patriots decided, you know what? No, it's time for us to community organize. It's time for us to get out there and give a voice to these silent people who feel marginalized. And that's where the Tea Party movement started. Talk me through that and inspire some people right now who may be feeling, like we said, a little disheartened.
You know, look, on a personal level, I'm just like anybody else. I'm just a regular guy. At the time, I was living in a small town in Northern California, and I was frustrated by what I saw in politics, and I started to see some people who were willing to stand up. And in February of '09, we went out and protested. I held a little protest there at the Capitol in Sacramento, California. About 150 people showed up. I'd never protested. I'm a conservative. We don't protest.
We don't do that. We don't march.
Work, right?
We have lives. Yeah. We got to raise our kids. Exactly.
Exactly. So I went out and did that. 150 people showed up. I was inspired to think, wow, there's 149 people as crazy as I am in California. And so we continued to do that. I reached out all around the country. I met people all over the country who had done that. We organized the April 15th, the Tax Day Tea Party protest in 2009. 1.2 million people came out that day. That was the largest multi-city single-day protest in world history. And then we continued to organize. But the thing to remember is, Look, I was one of the people organizing it. I didn't start it. I didn't invent it. I helped give it a place to organize. But who was I? I never was engaged in politics. I never was an activist. I wasn't a public figure. But because the moment required it, I stepped up. I felt called to step up, as did millions of other people. And so I think that's the thing for anybody who's dejected right now or worried right now, or we may lose the country if you're feeling like that. And I don't blame you for feeling like that. So take that feeling and turn it into a fight. That's what so many millions did in 2010. And frankly, they're still doing it today. That's why Donald Trump got elected.
That is absolutely why Donald Trump got elected. And yes, the end of, well, not the end of the story, but where the story led was 2010, a historic midterm election that really the Democrats, I think, lost more seats from their majority than I think any in 150 years or something. By 2014, Harry Reid was no longer running the Senate, and the Republicans have held on to the majority in the Senate there. And ultimately, 2016, Donald Trump wins the presidency. That leads us to where we are now, Mark Meckler, and it brought you eventually to the Convention of the States. First of all, just remind everybody what the main goal of Convention of the States is. You guys are actually much more than just organizing for a Convention of the States and getting a Convention of the States going, but it does start there. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, my overarching goal is to build the biggest self-governing citizen grassroots army in American history. We've actually done that. We're just getting started, but we've done that today. Almost 5 million people, 4.7 million people organized all around the country in every state, legislative, and congressional district. The initial goal to call a convention of states to take the power away from the federal government by proposing constitutional amendments that take that power away and return it to the people in the states. And we've got to do that. It's in the Constitution. The founders told us we would need to do it. So that's what we're doing. What it's done in the process,
can
Larry, is
can
what
I pause? I want to go on there, but I know there are people in their cars right now that hear that, Mark Meckler, and they say, no, if we have a convention, then Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez will go there and do away with the First and Second Amendment, and they'll write socialism into the Constitution. So sadly, you always have to explain away that argument and how that's not what's going to happen here.
Sure. So a convention can be limited by subject matter. We've done that. You can only talk about things that would impose fiscal restraints on the federal government, like a balanced budget, things that would impose term limits on Congress, on the staffers, on the bureaucrats, and even on the judiciary, and then only things that would impose what we call scope and jurisdiction limits on the federal government, like telling them, no, you can't be involved in energy, no, you can't be involved in education. People say we can't do that. And I just want to do a thought experiment, Larry, which I've done this on the radio and television all over the country for the last 7 years. People are worried, and they'll say something like, hey, look, they're going to do away with the Second Amendment. I'm a big gun rights guy. I come from a law enforcement family. My son's a Marine. They're going to do away with the Second Amendment, Mark. We can't let that happen. And I say, well, they can't propose that in convention. It can't get out of convention. But even if it could, let's say it goes out to the states. You got to have 38 states to ratify. And I'll throw this out there. My email address, mmeckler@cosaction.com. If somebody's fearful of an amendment that they wouldn't like, tell me what the amendment is and name the 38 states. And I've said that, Larry, to millions of people over the last 7 years. I've never gotten an email. It's impossible. On the Second Amendment, there are 15 states that allow citizens to carry their handguns in the state capitol, 25 states where there's some form of carry allowed in the state capitol. And having been in all of them, I'll tell you, if you're going to suggest that in one of those state capitals, I hope you're carrying your handgun because you're going to need it to get out of there alive.
So before you discount this or raise an argument that can so easily be shot down like Mark Meckler just did, go to conventionofstates.com, educate yourself on exactly how this convention would work and the fact that you can limit exactly what's discussed at these conventions when a state legislature calls for the convention, and then you'll know the answers, and then you won't have a reason why this shouldn't happen. All right, so Mark, I cut you off there because you talked about what the eventual goal here is, but what it's already led to now, what Convention of the States is actually doing.
Yeah, so this last election is an incredible example of what a grassroots army can do. So we took this army, and instead of saying, let's just focus on convention, we said, well, we got elections to worry about. That's in the here and now. The convention's in the future. And our activists got involved in doing Get Out the Vote, and we participated in over 256 elections across the country, just doing Get Out the Vote in states all across the country. Literally, no exaggeration, victorious in every single election that we participated in. In particular states, I can give you, like in South Carolina, our grassroots activists worked on 17 campaigns, 17 victories. In the Texas House of Representatives, we were really worried about 17, that same number here, 17 seats. They could have flipped the House with 8 seats here in Texas. We participated in 17 races, 17 victories. Because when you have an organized grassroots army willing to make the calls, knock on the doors, send the texts, it has a tremendous impact.
See, and this is what happens. You know, you start the idea of the Convention of the States and say, okay, how do we do that? Well, we get state legislatures to start passing it. And then you hit resistance with certain state legislatures and certain members of leadership of both parties, by the way. In those state legislatures. So what does the Convention of the States organization do through their political action? They get rid of those state legislators. They run a different candidate and they back a different candidate, and that's how you make the change. And now that you win all of those seats you just talked about, Mark Meckler, you can now propose the legislation in those states, and it'll have an easier way.
Yeah, and we've passed 15 states already. Everybody told us this is impossible. It's never been done before, so not an unreasonable statement. We've passed 15 states already. I can tell you in the coming months what people are going to see is they're going to see Michigan pass, Ohio pass, Pennsylvania pass, West Virginia pass, South Carolina pass. We look good in Kentucky and Wyoming. And I mean, it's going to be a banner year. I'm saying between 6 and 10 states are going to pass it. We're going to be upwards of 25 states having made the application.
And this truly, and it's funny because so many of my friends and even my colleagues, I've said it a bit over the last few months, as you look at the money and the organization from the organized left in this country and what they're able to achieve through their tactics. And we sit around and say, well, where is our George Soros, right? Where's our one guy who will write the check and do this? And the fact of the matter is we don't need a George Soros. We need organizations and the American people to just be committed and actually believe that they can make a difference. And I believe the Convention of the States is certainly one of those avenues, Mark.
Yeah, look, to me, it's all about grassroots. Politics is about two things, really. It's about people and money, and the more people you have, the less money you need. You always need both in politics, but it's really a people game, and if you have the people willing to do the work, then you can accomplish your goals, and that's what we have to do is American citizens, your listeners have to understand if they're feeling down, the thing to do is stand up, dust themselves off, and get engaged. It really is up to you. If you're listening and you're thinking, well, how are we going to save the country? My answer is you are going to save the country, but you've got to do something. One of the things you can do is come to conventionofstates.com, get involved. We'll put you to work as much or as little as you want.
And by the way, I mean, while we still do live in a country where we can be part of the change and make a difference, I fear that if we don't stand up and actually protect this republic, we might not be able to say that years from now, maybe sooner rather than later. But while we still are able to make a change, let's not spoil it and let's not waste it. And Mark, I know that your organization right now does not go necessarily into the specifics as to which amendments you would support or back, or maybe you do. I mean, I would think you would use the Mark Levin book, The Liberty Amendments, as a great, guide point there. But can you give us an idea, if you were to achieve your goal of having a convention of the states, what kind of changes you would be aiming for our Constitution?
Yeah, I'll give you some. I'll start with the real obvious ones. I mean, about 80 to 85% of Americans consistently poll in favor of a balanced budget amendment of some kind. The federal government keeps spending more than they take in. The question is, how long is that sustainable? And the answer is until it's not. And at some point it won't be, and the economy will collapse, and so we've got to fix that. So I think we'll see some form of a balanced budget amendment. To be clear, it's really important if we do that we also put limitations on taxing, some kind of a percentage or GDP or population growth plus inflation percentages. And so I think we can do that. So that's one way that we're going to do it. Another way is by limiting terms for congressmen. There's a reason they love being there so much. It's the money, the power, prestige. Yep. So we need to limit their terms, but not just their terms, the terms of their staffers and the bureaucrats. Often that's where the real power resides, and so we need to churn those people out. I think we need a lifetime ban on lobbying for anyone who is employed by the government at any time. It should just be lifetime blanket ban. We've got to remove the lobby class from Washington, D.C. I don't mind lobbying. I mind people who take their contacts in government and turn that into money. And then finally, anything that would take the power away from the federal government, being very specific, it is kind of bipartisan that people hate the Department of Education. That money shouldn't leave the states and go to the federal government only to be parsed back with a bunch of strings on it. So what we need to do is just say, no, the federal government may not be involved in education. I would say that should expand to energy, environment, and a lot of the departments of the federal government that exist right now under the auspices of the Commerce Clause.
Conventionofstates.com. It's conventionofstates.com, and I know, Mark, you were actually one of the co-founders of this organization, right?
Yeah, myself and Michael Ferris, is really Mike Ferris's idea, and then he brought it to our organization, and we took the project.
Although technically, I think the founder of this idea was James Madison and Alexander Hamilton and whoever else wrote Article 5, because it's right there in the Constitution. It's Article 5 of the Constitution. You're just trying to make it happen. And I think that it's a great way to get people involved, energized, and actually see that they can make a difference. Mark, always good to talk to you. Let's do this more often, now more than ever, by the way. We need to have these conversations.
Absolutely. And thanks for being out there fighting the good fight on the airwaves. We need you out there.
Thank you. That's Mark Meckler, Convention of the States. It's Article 5 of the Constitution. There's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing scary about it. You want to make a difference? Hey, I got an idea. Let's make a difference then. ConventionofStates.com. It's the Larry O'Connor Show.
I'm here live in Philadelphia at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. When you hear the phrase lives, fortunes, and sacred honor, these are the folks we should think of, those who anonymously gave their lives. Well, today you have a chance to volunteer. You need to volunteer for ConventionofStates.com, the movement that's going to save the country. These folks are willing to step up and give everything. We need you to give just a little bit. Go to ConventionofStates.com and volunteer today.